Americans always tell me they're worried about making cultural mistakes when they visit Spain. And honestly, I get it. Look, there's nothing wrong with being an American tourist, but after living in Madrid for over 5 years and watching thousands of American visitors navigate Spanish culture, I can tell you that you're going to have a much more authentic, less embarrassing, and definitely more enjoyable experience if you can avoid the 7 biggest mistakes that Americans consistently make when they come to Spain. In this video, I'm going to break down these 7 critical mistakes and give you the exact strategies to blend in with the locals so that by the end of this 20-minute deep dive, you'll be ready to experience Spain like someone who actually lives here rather than someone who just flew in from Dallas. Last month, I was sitting in my favorite tapas bar in the Malasaña neighborhood when this group of Americans walked in at 6 p.m., immediately started waving at the waiter, snapping their fingers, and when he didn't rush over within 30 seconds, one of them actually said, "Excuse me, we've been waiting forever and the customer service here is terrible." The entire bar went silent and I could see the waiter's face just drop. That moment encapsulated so many of the mistakes we're going to cover today. Mistake number 1 is treating Spanish waiters like American waiters. And this is probably the most common cultural collision I see every single day. Americans come to Spain expecting the same level of hovering, attentive service they get back home, and when they don't get it, they assume the service is bad or the waiter is rude. Here's what's actually happening. Spanish waiters are not paid through tips the way American waiters are. They receive a living wage, which means their entire approach to service is fundamentally different. They're not trying to turn tables quickly, they're not checking on you every 5 minutes, and they're definitely not going to bring you the check unless you specifically ask for it. I learned this the hard way during my first month in Madrid when I sat in a restaurant for literally 2 hours waiting for someone to bring me the bill. I kept making eye contact with the waiter, doing that little writing motion with my hand that Americans do, and he just smiled and nodded, but never brought the check. Finally, my Spanish friend explained that I actually had to walk up to him and say, "La cuenta, por favor," which means, "The check, please." Here's how to handle Spanish restaurant service like a local. First, when you want to order, you need to be assertive. Put your hand up, make eye contact, and say, "Disculpe," which means, "Excuse me." Don't snap your fingers, don't wave frantically, just a simple hand raise and "Disculpe." Second, understand that the waiter might not come immediately, and that's normal. Third, when you're ready for the check, you have to ask for it directly. Say "La cuenta, por favor," and they'll bring it right over. And finally, remember that tipping is optional and usually just rounding up to the nearest euro. The key mindset shift here is understanding that Spanish restaurant culture prioritizes your ability to relax and enjoy your meal without being rushed. The waiter isn't hovering because they respect your space and your time. Mistake number 2 is eating at completely the wrong times, and this one is so common that I've started calling it American hunger schedule syndrome. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen Americans standing outside restaurants at 5:30 p.m., confused and frustrated that nothing is open, or worse, going to the few places that are open at those hours and wondering why the food is mediocre and expensive. Here's the reality of Spanish eating schedules. Breakfast happens between 8 and 10 a.m., but it's just coffee and maybe a pastry. Lunch, which is the main meal of the day, happens between 2 and 4 p.m. This is a proper sit-down meal that can last 2 hours. Dinner doesn't even start until 9 p.m. at the earliest, and most Spaniards eat between 9:30 and 11 p.m. I remember my first week in Madrid, I was starving at 6 p.m. and found this restaurant that was open. I ordered paella and it was honestly terrible. The rice was mushy, the seafood was clearly reheated, and it cost twice what good paella should cost. My Spanish neighbor later explained that any restaurant serving dinner at 6 p.m. is either a tourist trap or not a real Spanish restaurant. Here's how to eat like a local. Have a light breakfast around 9 a.m. at a cafeteria. For lunch, plan to eat between 2 and 3 p.m. when restaurants are serving their menú del día, which is usually the best value and highest quality meal you'll get. This is typically a 3-course meal with bread, wine, or water included for around 12 to 15 euros. For dinner, don't even think about eating before 8:30 p.m., and ideally wait until 9 or 9:30. But here's the insider secret. If you're struggling with the late dinner time, go for tapas around 7 or 8 p.m. This isn't a full meal, but it's a way to have some food and drinks while you wait for dinner time. Mistake number 3 is ordering paella completely wrong. And this one makes me cringe every single time because I know the American is about to have a disappointing experience. Paella is not Spanish fast food, it's not something you order for yourself as an individual meal, and it's definitely not something you should order at a random restaurant in Madrid just because it's on the menu. Real paella comes from Valencia. It takes at least 20 minutes to cook properly. It's meant to be shared by at least two people, and it should only be ordered at restaurants that specialize in paella. The paella you see in tourist areas that's sitting under heat lamps, ready to serve immediately, is not real paella. It's tourist paella, and it's going to be disappointing. Here's how to order paella correctly. First, only order it at restaurants that specialize in paella or are known for their paella. Second, always order it for at least two people. Third, be prepared to wait 20 to 30 minutes. Fourth, if you're in Madrid, consider taking a day trip to Valencia where paella originated. But here's what you should order instead if you want great Spanish food. Jamón ibérico, which is the best ham in the world. Tortilla española, which is the perfect Spanish comfort food. Patatas bravas, which are crispy potatoes with spicy sauce. And gambas al ajillo, which are garlic shrimp that will change your life. These are dishes that every Spanish restaurant does well, they're authentic, and they're what locals actually eat regularly. Mistake number 4 is completely misunderstanding Spanish social drinking culture. And this one can get Americans into actual trouble because they apply American drinking patterns to Spanish drinking situations. Spanish drinking culture is built around slow, social consumption with food, not around getting drunk quickly. When Spaniards go out for drinks, they're going out for conversation, for socializing, and the alcohol is just part of that social experience. I witnessed this disaster at a wine bar in the Chueca neighborhood where a group of American guys ordered a bottle of wine and finished it in about 15 minutes, then ordered another one and started getting loud and rowdy. The Spanish patrons started giving them dirty looks, the bartender stopped being friendly, and eventually they were asked to leave. Here's how to drink like a local in Spain. First, always order food with your drinks. Spaniards never drink on an empty stomach, and many bars will automatically bring you a small tapa with your drink. Second, pace yourself to match the locals. Watch how slowly they sip their wine or beer, how much they talk between sips. Third, understand that Spanish social drinking often lasts for hours, so you need to pace accordingly. The mental shift you need to make is understanding that in Spain, how you drink is more important than what you drink or how much you drink. Spanish drinking is about extending social time, not about escaping reality or getting drunk. Mistake number 5 is dressing like you're going to a theme park instead of visiting a sophisticated European country. Spanish people, especially in cities like Madrid and Barcelona, dress more formally than Americans in almost every situation. What Americans consider nice casual is what Spaniards consider sloppy. When Americans show up in flip-flops, shorts, and t-shirts with English writing on them, they're immediately marked as tourists, and locals will treat them differently. I learned this lesson when I tried to go to a nice restaurant in the Salamanca district wearing jeans and a polo shirt. The hostess seated me at a table near the kitchen, while Spanish diners in dress shirts and nice pants got the good tables by the window. It wasn't until I started dressing more like the locals that I noticed how differently I was treated. Here's how to dress like a local. For men, wear long pants even in summer, choose solid colors over graphic t-shirts, invest in nice shoes because Spaniards notice shoes, and always have a collared shirt for restaurants. For women, avoid athletic wear unless you're actually exercising, choose dresses or nice pants over shorts, and invest in comfortable but stylish walking shoes. The specific mistake that drives me crazy is Americans wearing athletic wear as regular clothing. In Spain, if you're wearing gym clothes, people assume you're going to or coming from the gym. The cultural insight here is that Spaniards view clothing as a form of respect, both for yourself and for the people around you. Mistake number 6 is trying to speak Spanish with an American accent and American grammar patterns instead of learning even basic Spanish pronunciation. The biggest issue isn't that Americans don't speak Spanish, it's that they try to speak Spanish using English pronunciation rules, which makes them very difficult to understand even when they're using the right Spanish words. I cringe every time I hear an American ask for quesadillas instead of quesadillas or say gracias instead of gracias. These pronunciation mistakes make it genuinely difficult for Spanish speakers to understand what you're trying to say. Here's how to speak Spanish like someone who actually cares about communication. First, learn that Spanish vowels are always pronounced the same way. A is always A, E is always A, I is always E, O is always O, and U is always U. Second, Spanish R's are rolled, and while you don't need to master the roll, you should at least try to make it sound different from an English R. Third, Spanish J's sound like English H's, So jamon is pronounced jamon, not jaimon. My advice is to learn 10 essential phrases perfectly rather than trying to learn 100 words poorly. Master, disculpe, habla inglés, which means, excuse me, do you speak English? Master, no hablo español muy bien, which means I don't speak Spanish very well. When you pronounce these phrases correctly, Spanish people will be much more patient and helpful with you. Mistake number 7 is the biggest one, and it's treating Spain like it's Mexico, or assuming that Spanish culture is the same everywhere Spanish is spoken. Spain is a European country with European customs, European history, and European social norms. The fact that Spain and Mexico both speak Spanish doesn't mean they have the same culture any more than America and England both speaking English means they have the same culture. I've seen Americans go to Spanish restaurants and complain that the salsa isn't spicy enough, not realizing that salsa isn't Spanish food, it's Mexican food. I've seen Americans try to bargain at Spanish markets like they're at a Mexican mercado, not understanding that bargaining isn't part of Spanish shopping culture. The most embarrassing example I witnessed was at a flamenco show in Seville where an American tourist kept shouting, Arriba, Arriba, like he was at a Mexican restaurant. The Spanish audience was mortified because flamenco is a serious art form, not party entertainment. Here's what you need to understand. Spanish food is Mediterranean, focusing on olive oil, seafood, ham, and wine, not spicy peppers and corn-based dishes. Spanish social behavior is more reserved and formal than Mexican social behavior. Spanish history and cultural references come from European experiences, not Latin American experiences. When Americans treat Spain like Mexico, they're not just making cultural mistakes, they're being disrespectful to both cultures. My advice is to research Spanish culture specifically, not just Spanish-speaking culture. Learn about Spanish history, Spanish art, and Spanish social customs. Now let me share a story that ties all of these mistakes together. Last summer, I was at a restaurant in the Barrio de las Letras when a family of Americans came in at 6 p.m. wearing flip-flops and t-shirts that said Spring Break Cancun. They immediately started snapping their fingers at the waiter and complaining about slow service. When the waiter came over, they ordered paella and asked if they could make it not too spicy like Mexican food. When their drinks arrived, they finished them quickly and ordered shots, getting progressively louder. And when they tried to communicate, they kept saying grassy ass instead of gracias. The entire restaurant was staring at them, the waiter looked frustrated, and the family kept getting more upset because they felt like they were receiving bad service. But the reality was that they had violated every major cultural norm within their first 30 minutes. Here's what I want you to understand. Avoiding these 7 mistakes isn't about pretending to be Spanish or losing your American identity. It's about showing respect for the culture you're visiting and creating the conditions for authentic cultural exchange. When you eat at the right times, dress appropriately, drink socially, speak respectfully, and approach Spain as its own unique culture, Spanish people will welcome you and share their culture with you in ways that will make your trip unforgettable. So here's my challenge. Pick 3 of these 7 mistakes that you know you would have made and commit to avoiding them on your trip to Spain. Focus on getting those 3 things right rather than trying to be perfect at everything. Master the Spanish eating schedule, learn to pronounce 10 Spanish phrases correctly, and dress like you're visiting a sophisticated European country. If you found this helpful and want more specific advice about visiting Spain, I've created a comprehensive guide to Madrid that includes my favorite restaurants, hidden gems, and cultural insights designed specifically for Americans who want authentic Spanish experiences. You can find the link in the description below. Let me know in the comments which of these mistakes you think you would have made, and I'll see you in the next video where we're diving deep into Spanish restaurant etiquette and the specific phrases you need to navigate Spanish dining culture like a local.